My daughter left Noah, my 5-year-old grandson, who was born deaf, on my doorstep and disappeared. That was 12 years ago. I've raised him on my own ever since. Everyone said he would never fit in. Too quiet. Too different. They were wrong. At 17, Noah has an almost perfect visual memory and earned a $185,000 Young Talent grant from a gallery in Kansas City. Then, the media began to take notice
Good
of him.
afternoon.
The local arts
May
segment
we
on
have a
TV
moment
ran
of
a
your
piece.
time to discuss a
Rising
private
deaf
matter?
artist from Independence captures light like a camera. 2 weeks after that, my doorbell rang and my daughter showed up with a lawyer and a stack of lies. My name is Helen Marshall. I'm 70. I live in Missouri, in the same little one-story house I bought with my late husband 40 years ago. I thought I'd be spending my last decades tending tomatoes, reading mystery novels, and complaining about my knees. Instead, I've spent them raising my grandson Noah. And now I'm going to tell you how my own child tried to use forged memories to steal him, and how a boy who barely speaks used light to prove the truth. The afternoon Jenna came back. I was wiping down the kitchen counters. Noah was in the back bedroom he uses as a studio, working on a commission piece. The TV from the living room was still low from the gallery interview the night before. The doorbell rang 3 quick chimes. I didn't expect anyone. Our friends text. The mail carrier knocks. Doorbell usually means someone selling solar panels. I opened the door. Jenna stood on my porch in a tailored camel coat, hair blown out smooth, makeup subtle and expensive. Beside her stood a man in a charcoal suit holding a leather portfolio. "Hi, Mom," Jenna said. My stomach dropped so fast I had to grab the door frame. For a second I couldn't breathe. 12 years evaporated, and I was looking at the same girl who once rolled her eyes at curfews and swore she'd never be stuck in this town. Except she wasn't a girl anymore. Lines at the corners of her mouth, something hard around her eyes. "Noah here?" she asked, glancing past me, like she had a right. The man stepped forward, polite and practiced. "Mrs. Marshall, I'm Thomas Sanders. I represent Miss Jenna Hall." He said her last name like she'd never been Jenna Marshall at all. "We're here about Noah's situation." His situation? My voice felt rusty. "It would be easier if we spoke inside," Jenna said. Her smile was soft, almost apologetic. It didn't reach her eyes. "This is important, Mom." I should have said no. I should have shut the door. Instead, I stepped back like someone had pressed a button. They walked into my house as if they'd never left, as if this kitchen table was still theirs. Noah appeared at the end of the hallway, barefoot in threadbare jeans and a paint-splattered t-shirt, curls tied back. He wore his hearing aids, small black devices tucked behind his ears, and watched us with that still, focused stare of his. Jenna looked at him and froze. "Baby," she breathed. Noah's face didn't change. No flicker of recognition. No anger. Just that intense, neutral attention he gives a wall or a tree he's about to draw. We all sat at the table, the same table where I'd taught Noah to sign the word grandma, where we sorted medical bills, where he'd signed his first gallery contract. Sanders slid documents out of his portfolio like cards in a magic trick. "Mrs. Marshall," he said, all firm politeness. "My client has maintained parental rights to Noah and has remained involved in his life for the past 12 years. She is petitioning for legal guardianship and financial management of his artist grant until he reaches majority." "I'm sorry, what?" I gripped the edge of the table. "Guardianship? Of him?" "He's 17, Sanders said. "Under Missouri law, he's still a minor. Miss Hall has never relinquished her parental rights. She has documentation of ongoing contact and financial support." He laid out color prints, glossy photographs, stills from videos, photocopies of money order receipts, pages of what looked like handwritten letters. "This," he said, tapping a photo, "is December 2014, Christmas visit. Here's a July 2017 day at the park. Here's a money order for therapy costs in 2016. And here are printed transcripts of regular phone calls." Every image showed Jenna with a little boy who looked like Noah would have at those ages, same dark hair, same serious eyes. In some photos, she sat on a couch with him. In others, they stood on a playground or next to a Christmas tree. The dates in the corner spanned 12 years. It felt like watching someone project a movie of a life I'd never lived. "These are fake," I said. "You haven't been here since he was 5. You left him on my porch and never came back." Jenna pulled in a breath, eyes shining. "I know it feels that way, Mom, but I've been involved. From a distance. You pushed me away. I sent money, I called, I visited when you'd let me. I have all the records." She rested her manicured hand on the stack like it was a Bible. Fire roared in my chest. "That's not true, and you know it." "Missus?" "Marshall," Sanders said smoothly. "I understand this is emotional. But unless you can provide evidence that these are forged, the court will likely recognize Miss Hall's ongoing involvement and grant her guardianship, particularly regarding Noah's substantial funds." $185,000. The number flashed in my mind like a neon sign. I looked at Noah. He watched Jenna, eyes narrow, head tilted a fraction, as if he were lining up invisible grid lines over her face. Then he looked at the photos, one by one, without touching them. "Grandma," he said, speaking softly, his words precise like they always were, like each one cost him something. "Let me see." I quote. 3 words, and somehow I could breathe again. To understand what those 3 words meant, I have to go back 12 years, to the weekend that was supposed to last 48 hours and turned into a lifetime. It was late October, the kind of gray, damp Saturday that makes the whole neighborhood smell like wet leaves. I remember because the Cardinals were in the playoffs, and my neighbor had their TV loud enough that I could hear the announcer through their open window. The doorbell rang. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and opened the door. Jenna stood there holding the hand of a boy with a mop of dark curls and cheeks pink from the chill. Noah. 5 years old. He kept his eyes pinned to the porch boards, body rigid, one shoulder tucked slightly behind her leg. He didn't look at me. He didn't look anywhere. His gaze was fixed and far away, like he was staring at something I couldn't see. "Just for the weekend, Mom," Jenna said, shifting the backpack on her shoulder. She sounded tired, but jittery, wired on coffee or nerves. "I need a break, please." "Jenna, what's—" "I'll pick him up Sunday night," she said, already backing away. "You'll be fine. He's quiet." "Noah, sweetheart." I bent down a little, tried to catch his eye. "Want to come inside?" He didn't move. He held a small spiral notepad in one hand and a pencil in the other. His knuckles were white. "Jenna, wait," I said. "We need to talk about his—" "I'll call you tomorrow," she said. She didn't hug him, didn't kiss his hair. She turned and walked fast down the sidewalk toward her car. I stood frozen as the taillights disappeared around the corner. When I turned back, Noah hadn't moved. He was drawing on the notepad without looking. Tiny lines, over and over, like cross-hatching. I'd taught elementary school for 35 years. I'd had a few deaf students, always with interpreters and IEP teams and experts sitting in little fold-out chairs at conferences. Standing on my own porch with my 5-year-old grandson, who hadn't looked at me or said a word, I realized I knew next to nothing about what it meant to live with deafness, day in and day out. "Noah," I said gently. I touched the doorknob, then pointed inside, then to my chest. Grandma's house. I'd only learned a few signs from an online video Jenna had sent months before. I signed house with my hands and felt foolish. No response. I picked up his backpack. It was light, too light. A change of clothes. A single t-shirt that wasn't his size. No pajamas. No toothbrush. No hearing aids. My throat tightened. I opened the door wide and stepped aside. After a moment, Noah shuffled past me, eyes still down. The kitchen light hummed. The refrigerator motor kicked on. He flinched at the changes in vibration, shoulders tensing. He walked straight to the living room, sat near the window, and started to draw on the notepad again. Fast, furious little marks. "Are you hungry?" I asked. He didn't react. "Thirsty?" Nothing. I rummaged in the cupboard and pulled out a small ivory ceramic mug I usually used for tea. It was the right size for his hands. I filled it with water and set it on the coffee table a few feet away from him. He paused, glancing at the shiny rim catching the afternoon light, then went back to drawing. That first night was a mess. Jenna had once told me he liked chicken nuggets, so I made some from a frozen bag and set them in front of him with ketchup. He stared at them and pushed the plate away. I tried buttered noodles. No. A grilled cheese. He shoved the plate so hard it nearly fell. I was exhausted and already angry at my daughter, and this little boy was not eating and not speaking and not looking at me. "What do you want, honey?" I asked, my voice cracking. He lifted his pencil, pointed to the ivory mug like it was obvious, then tapped his own chest. "Oh," I said softly. Water first. I refilled the mug. He drank, slow, deliberate sips, eyes half closed like he was tasting light instead of water. Bedtime was worse. I tried to get him to brush his teeth. The moment the brush neared his mouth, he jerked away, little body rigid, eyes wide with panic. Okay, I said quickly, lifting my hands to show I wasn't going to force it. We can skip tonight, kiddo. I made up the guest bed with fresh sheets and a blue blanket I thought a 5-year-old boy would like. I tucked it around him. He kicked it off instantly, gasping like he couldn't breathe. All right, I said. No blanket. I laid it folded at the end of the bed and sat on the edge. I'm right here, honey, I sighed. He lay stiff and still, staring at the rectangle of streetlight on the wall. He didn't sleep. I could hear soft scrapes of pencil on paper and the faint creak of the mattress all night. Every time the furnace turned on, he tensed. I didn't sleep either. I sat in the hallway with my back against the wall, listening to him exist in a world I couldn't hear. The next morning I called Jenna. No answer. I left a voicemail. Jenna, it's Mom. Call me back. We need to talk about Noah's routines, his doctors, everything. Nothing. I called again that night. Nothing. 1 week stretched into 2. I bought children's toothpaste with no flavor. I experimented with food until I discovered he'd reliably eat scrambled eggs and toast, as long as the toast was cut diagonally and nothing touched anything else on the plate. I scheduled a pediatrician appointment. The doctor, a woman with kind eyes and tired shoulders, performed a basic exam and then referred us to an audiologist and a speech pathologist. A week later, after a flurry of tests with headphones and tiny beeps, Noah couldn't hear at all. We sat in a small office. Mrs. Marshall, the audiologist said, folding her hands. Noah has bilateral sensory neural hearing loss. He's profoundly deaf. Has anyone discussed this with you before? No, I said. His mother was supposed to handle that. She nodded. We'll talk about hearing aids, maybe implants, and speech therapy. But we also need to talk about communication, ASL, education, services. She looked straight at me. Right now, you're the one here. That makes you his advocate. 2 days before Christmas, I was making sugar cookies in my tiny kitchen, the whole house smelling like vanilla and butter and the kind of holidays Jenna used to love when she was little. The phone rang. I grabbed it with floury hands, heart stuttering. Jenna, I said. Thank God. When are you coming to get him? He needs. I can't do this, Mom. Her voice was hollow, brittle. Somewhere in the background I heard muffled music, a TV, laughter. What? I can't. I've tried. I can't give him what he needs. A jagged breath. You're better at this. You always were. Jenna. That's not how this works, I said. My knees went weak. I braced myself against the counter. You can't just. I'm sorry, she whispered. He's better off with you. I can't be his mom. I can't do it, okay? I'm drowning. Jenna. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, at my shaking hands, at the tray of cookies burning in the oven because I'd forgotten to set a timer. Smoke curled out when I opened the door. I pulled the tray out with bare hands, not feeling the heat, and set it on the stovetop. The cookies were black. I slid down the cabinets until I was sitting on the floor, back against the drawers, fingers smarting, heart pounding. I had been a teacher for 3 decades. I'd broken up fights and talked kids through panic attacks and funerals and divorces. I'd handled my husband's cancer and his funeral with more composure than this. I couldn't seem to breathe now. Noah stepped into the doorway, bare feet silent on the linoleum. He watched me for a long time, longer than he'd ever looked directly at me before. Then he walked to the counter, picked up the same ivory mug I'd given him that first night, filled it with tap water, and carried it carefully to me. He set it beside my hip on the floor. Then he went back to the living room without a word. I looked at the mug. The light from the kitchen window was catching on a faint chip along the rim I hadn't noticed before. I started to cry quietly at first, then full-body sobs that wouldn't stop. The mug stayed where he'd put it. It's still in my cabinet today. The years after that blurred into routines, small adjustments, and the slow learning of a new language. I signed up for an ASL night class at the community college. I watched YouTube videos made by deaf creators about facial expressions and grammar and how rude it is to say, never mind when someone asks what you said. At home, we built a world Noah could rely on. Every evening, I turned on 3 lamps, one by the couch, one in the corner near the bookshelf, one by the hallway. Overhead lights were too harsh, too unpredictable. I bought a green rug, thick, soft, always in the same place in front of the couch. The edges became a border. Noah seemed to understand instinctively. Safe zone. I nailed heavy curtains over the bedroom window on the street side to soften the flash of headlights at night. Dinner was at 6, always. Eggs and toast for breakfast every morning. Lunch boxes packed the same way. If I had to change anything, I told him in advance and signed it slowly. Different today. Then I mimed the change till he nodded. He started using the ivory mug every day, always for water, always set to the right of his plate at meals, always left on the counter in the same spot afterward. It became less a mug and more a marker, his way of staking a claim on the day. The more consistent I made the world, the less tightly wound he seemed. He would sit at the kitchen table while I cooked, drawing in small sketchbooks I bought in bulk at the Dollar General. He would plant himself on the green rug and watch the way the afternoon sun shifted across the floor, then sketch it with quick, sure strokes. He still didn't speak much, but he started making small sounds, frustrated grunts when he dropped a pencil, a pleased hum when he got a line the way he wanted. Every night before bed, I stood in his doorway, hand on the frame, and signed good night. At first he didn't look at me. Then he started glancing up, just for a second, enough to see the sign. One night, when he was 6, he hesitated, then lifted his own hand and signed it back. It was clumsy and a little out of order, but he did it. I went to the bathroom and cried quietly into a hand towel so he wouldn't see. By 7, Noah had filled an entire dresser drawer with sketchbooks. At first, they were just chaotic lines and blocks of shading. Then, slowly, they turned into rooms, hallways, trees in the yard, the kitchen table, not just the objects, but the light itself. In one drawing, our living room looked ordinary until you noticed every lamp had a halo of pencil marks around it, showing how far the light traveled and where it faded. In another, the late afternoon sun slanted through the window, casting shadows from the blinds in perfect little stripes across the couch. Each stripe was exactly where it would be at 5:30 in December. He drew the ivory mug on the table over and over, each time with the light glint hitting a slightly different spot as the day changed. I brought a few sketchbooks to his speech therapist, a woman named Dr. Lynn, who wore bright scarves and had laugh lines around her eyes. "He draws like this constantly," I said. "Is this normal?" She flipped through page after page, eyebrows climbing. "This is extraordinary." "He barely talks," I said. "He signs some, but most of the time he's just in his head." "His head is busy," she said. "He's tracking his environment visually, the way hearing kids track it through sound. He notices things we don't." Noah started school in the district's program for deaf and hard-of-hearing kids. They had interpreters and some basic services. I was relieved until 2nd grade, when they told me he'd be better off in a self-contained classroom for kids with multiple challenges. "He's deaf, not incapable," I told the principal, a man named Andrews who always spoke with his "everyone calm down" voice. "Miss Marshall," he said, folding his hands. "Noah struggles with social interaction. He doesn't respond when teachers speak to him. He seems distracted." The smaller setting, "He's deaf," I repeated. "He needs sign language access, not fewer expectations." Of Weiss. I insisted on an IEP meeting. I dug through my growing binder of evaluations and therapy reports, highlighting every line that said average intelligence or above grade level visual memory. When the meeting finally happened, the fluorescent lights hummed overhead and the interpreter sat between Noah and the rest of the team, signing everything. "He doesn't make eye contact," his teacher said gently. "He keeps his head down and draws all the time." I glanced at him. He sat with his arms folded, watching the interpreter, his little jaw clenched. "Does he do his work?" I signed and spoke at the same time, keeping my eyes on Noah. The interpreter signed to the teacher. The teacher hesitated. "Yes, usually correctly. His reading is above grade level. So the problem is that he doesn't look the way you expect a student to look when they're learning," I said. "Mrs. Marshall," the school psychologist said, "we're just concerned about his social development." "I'm concerned about him getting a fair shot at an education," I replied. Under IDA, he's entitled to the least restrictive environment. That means mainstream classes with interpreters and supports, not warehousing him because he makes you uncomfortable. I saw the interpreter's eyebrows jump as she signed warehousing. We argued for an hour. I left with a written agreement. Noah would stay in mainstream classes with an interpreter, plus a social skills group. Noah and I went out for ice cream afterward. He sat in the booth, watching the way the neon sign flickered in the window. He drew it on a napkin, the exact pattern of the flicker. A year later, in 3rd grade, Noah caught his first cheater. We were at a parent-teacher conference. Mrs. Brennan, his homeroom teacher, sat across from me with a polite smile. "Noah's very bright," she said. "Very observant. But he can be a little rigid." The interpreter signed, and Noah watched, arms folded. "What happened?" I asked. "We had a group art project last week. The kids were supposed to create collages based on their favorite places. One of his classmates brought in a drawing and claimed it was his own." She paused, glancing at Noah. Noah disagreed. The interpreter signed disagreed with a little twist. Noah's hands moved before I could ask. "He lied," he signed. "Not his picture. Shadow wrong." "Shadow?" I asked. Noah grabbed the paper. The teacher slid across the table a photocopy of the classmate's work and tapped a section near the bottom. "He said he drew this in our classroom at lunchtime," Mrs. Brennan explained. But Noah insisted he didn't. Noah pointed to the window in the drawing, then signed quickly, his movements sharp. "If sun there, shadow should be here." He stabbed a different spot on the page. "Not over there." Mrs. Brennan looked baffled. He was adamant. He got upset. I looked at the drawing, then at my grandson. "You remember where the sun was that day?" He nodded once. "Of course he did." I turned back to Mrs. Brennan. He wasn't being defiant. He was being accurate. She opened her mouth, then closed it, then nodded slowly. That was the first time I understood that Noah's art wasn't just pretty. It was evidence. He wasn't just drawing what things looked like. He was drawing what they were. Around 10, he became obsessed with labeling. He started writing tiny dates in the corners of every drawing, then times, then arrows indicating where the light came from. Sometimes he added little notes in cramped block letters. Clouds, streetlight, TV glow. He asked me for my old wall calendars. He flipped through them, scanning the scribbled appointments and events. Then he started matching drawings to the days. "This one," he signed one night, tapping a sketch of our kitchen bathed in golden evening light. "October. See? Pumpkin there." He'd drawn a little pumpkin on the table that I'd forgotten I put out. I thought he was processing his life through images, trying to make sense of his past. It felt like therapy. "Whatever helps, sweetheart," I told him. He started asking for other things. "Grandma," he signed one afternoon. "Do you have old bills? Lights, gas." "Why?" I asked, amused. He shrugged. "Dates, amounts, seasons." He signed each word carefully. I hauled out the plastic bin from the hall closet where I kept past due notices and paid bills like any other old teacher terrified of audits. He sat cross-legged on the green rug and sorted them by month, then season. He'd pick up a March electric bill, then find a drawing from that month. He'd compare the recorded sunset time I'd written on the calendar to the angle of the light in his sketch. He kept a separate notebook just for windows. He drew the view from every window in the house in each season. Winter trees stripped bare, summer leaves dense and dark, the different way snow reflected light versus rain. He didn't just draw Missouri. He drew places from the TV Florida beaches with their harsh, hot light, New York skyscrapers casting long, sharp shadows, Arizona deserts bleached almost white. At the time, it seemed like a quirky fixation. I didn't realize he was building a library inside his head, a visual archive of how light behaves in different places. In 8th grade, his art teacher, Miss Doyle, called me after school. "Miss Marshall," she said, sounding breathless. "I think Noah might actually be a genius." He's always been smart," I said, but my heart ticked up a notch. "This is different. He brought in a series he's been working on. He called it Light Map of Missouri. Have you seen it?" I hadn't. "He's drawn the same intersection in our town in every month of the year," she said. "Same angle, same time of day, but the light is different in each. The position of the sun, the length of the shadows, it's like a time-lapse in pencil." Pride flared in my chest, mixed with a strange unease. He doesn't show me everything he does at school, I said. Can I come by? The next day, I stood in the art room, staring at a grid of 12 drawings on the wall. Same four-way stop. Same cracked crosswalk lines, same telephone pole. January. Low, weak light, long bluish shadows stretching across the street. June. High, harsh sun, shadows tucked in tight against the objects casting them. October. Golden light, the tree on the corner exploding in graphite leaves, shadows longer but softer. Each drawing had a tiny code in the corner. A date, a time, a direction arrow. That's not just talent, Miss Doyle said. That's data. A month later, she pinned one of Noah's pieces up in the school hallway for an emerging artists board. A local critic saw it when he came to judge a PTA fundraiser. He asked who drew it. 4 weeks after that, the gallery in Kansas City called. We drove into the city for the first meeting on a gray Tuesday. Noah sat in the passenger seat watching the light change on the highway barriers. The gallery director, a woman in her 50s with silver hair, shaved close on one side, shook Noah's hand like she was meeting a visiting dignitary. "You must be our rising artist," she said with a big smile. "I'm Carla." Noah glanced at me. I signed "Nice to meet you," and he repeated it, stiff but polite. Carla walked us through the space-white walls, concrete floors, high ceilings with skylights that made Noah tilt his head back, studying the pattern of beams. "We'd like to offer you a contract, Noah," she said later at the conference table. 2 years, guaranteed monthly stipend of $7,500, plus we cover materials. We'll mount a solo show next spring. I tried to calculate that in my head. $7,500 a month, 24 months, $180,000, Noah said quietly, voice flat. Carla blinked, impressed. "That's right. We're rounding up for supplies and incidentals, so $185 total in the budget." I looked at him. He hadn't pulled out his phone or written anything down. He'd just done the math. "We'll need a parent or guardian signature," Carla added, glancing at me. "Miss Marshall, right? You'd be managing the funds until he's 18. My chest warmed. "Of course," I said. "Whatever he needs." They slid the papers across. Noah read every line, lips moving slightly, one finger tracing the clauses about ownership and reproduction rights. He tapped a paragraph and looked at me. I leaned closer. "Here," he said, speaking slowly. "They keep the originals until the show is over. Then, half go back to me, half stay on consignment." His voice was halting but precise. Each word was chosen. I nodded. "That's standard," Carla said. "We never sell without your consent." Noah's jaw tightened. He signed okay and picked up the pen. There was a photographer and a short write-up in the paper. Def. Teen Maps Light, Land's major gallery contract. They took a photo of him standing in front of one of his light maps, hands tucked into his pockets, eyes focused on some point beyond the camera. He didn't smile. "You excited?" I signed and said that night as we watched the online version of the article on my old laptop. He shrugged, fingers flicking. "It's good," he signed. Then he hesitated. "Also, noisy." Noise to Noah didn't mean sound. It meant attention, movement, unpredictability. In the days after the article, he grew quieter. He worked more, slept less. He started double-checking locks and windows at night. Once, I caught him standing in the dark kitchen at 2 a.m., staring at the glow of the digital clock on the stove. The ivory mug sat in front of him. Empty. "You okay, kiddo?" I whispered, even though he couldn't hear my voice without seeing my lips. He glanced at me, then signed. "Something will happen." "What?" He paused, struggling for words. "Light makes shadows. Attention makes people." I didn't understand then. 2 weeks later, my daughter showed up with her lawyer and her stack of fabricated memories. After they left that day, Sanders with his polite threats and Jenna with her sad eyes and fake regret, I called a lawyer of my own. Mary Ellis was recommended by a woman at our church, whose sister had nearly lost custody of her grandkids in a tangle of paperwork. Mary showed up at my house 2 days later in jeans and a blazer, a leather tote full of files over her shoulder. "Miss Marshall?" she said, shaking my hand firmly. "I'm Mary Ellis. Call me Mary." She sat at the same kitchen table, scanning the documents Sanders had left. Noah hovered in the doorway, arms folded, watching. Mary's brows drew together as she flipped through the photos, the photocopied money orders, the printed call logs. "These are very thorough," she said. "They're fake," I said. "She hasn't sent a cent or seen him since she dumped him here at 5. Mary nodded. "I believe you. But believe me when I say this. Courts don't rule on belief. They rule on evidence." I dragged out my own evidence. Binders of IEPs, medical reports, therapy notes, school photos, calendars, receipts. 10 years of being the only adult who showed up. Mary went through everything, page by page. Noah watched her hands move, his eyes flicking from paper to paper. "Here's the thing, Helen," Mary said finally, using my first name gently. "On paper, Jenna never surrendered her rights. There was no custody filing, no guardianship hearing, no termination. She abandoned him," I said. The word tasted like metal. "I know, but abandonment, legally, is something we have to prove. Right now, all we have is your testimony, and these records showing you've been the one doing the work." She tapped my binders. "They show you're his caregiver. They don't erase her as his mother. And those fake photos do?" My voice rose despite myself. Noah's jaw tightened at the change in my face. "If the judge thinks they're real?" Mary sighed. "It gives her a narrative. She was involved from afar. She sent money. She visited even through hard times. Without proof, they're forged. Yes, her case looks strong, at least for financial guardianship." I felt like the room was tilting. "She's trying to steal his money." "Of course she is," Mary said bluntly. "He's a rising artist with a 6-figure contract, and she sees that as her ticket. She's not asking for physical custody, is she?" "She said she wants him to live with her eventually," I said. Mary's mouth tightened. "Maybe. But legally, what she's petitioning for right now is control of his grant and any earnings. 2 years is a long time to siphon money off an account, even in small amounts." I swallowed hard. "What can we do?" "We contest the petition," Mary said. "We show the judge everything you've done. We argue that even if she kept her rights on paper, she forfeited her moral claim when she left him here and never came back." "That's it?" I asked. She hesitated. "Unless we can disprove her evidence?" "Yes." Noah shifted his weight. He stepped forward and tapped the pile of Jenna's photos with one finger. Mary looked up. "Noah," she said, and signed his name. "Young man, do you want to say something?" He signed slowly, making sure she saw each motion. "Can I keep those?" he asked. "I want to look." I opened my mouth to say, "No, those photos made my stomach lurch," but Mary nodded. "As long as we keep scans for the file, that's fine with me. I have Dewey." Noah gathered the stack and walked down the hallway to his room, expression unmoved. "What is he thinking?" Mary murmured. "I never know," I admitted. "But when he says he wants to see something, there's usually a reason." For the next few nights, Noah barely left his studio. I would wake up at 1, 2 in the morning, to the faint glow of his desk lamp bleeding into the hallway. I'd pad down to his door and see him hunched over the table, photos spread out, sketchbook open, pencil moving fast. He didn't look at faces in the photos. He looked at the backgrounds, the windows, the street outside, the way shadows fell across the floor. He'd glance at an image, then flip to a blank page and redraw the room in his style, adding arrows and notes. Light source, 2 p.m. Winter, incandescent string, tropical plant. I made him grilled cheese at midnight and left it beside the ivory mug on his desk. He'd sign thank you without looking up. One evening, I came in with tea and found a half-dozen of Jenna's photos taped to his wall in a row. Below them, he'd taped his own drawings, the same scenes, stripped down to their bones, with annotations all around. He tapped the first photo, labeled Christmas 2014, in Jenna's neat handwriting. A fake tree stood in a corner, a little boy on the couch beside her, presents piled around. "Look," Noah said, speaking this time, slow and careful. He pointed to the string of lights on the tree. "These?" I leaned closer. The bulbs were tiny, shaped like flat stars, with a distinctive beveled edge. "These lights," he said. "I saw them first at Target in 2017. He signed the year as well. Before that, Missouri stores had different kind. He flipped open a sketchbook and turned to a page labeled Target, December 2017. He'd drawn the seasonal aisle in obsessive detail, rows of boxes, each with a picture of the same star-shaped lights. I remember, he said simply. I stared at the paper. A cold thrill ran through me. He pointed to another photo, Park 2016, where Jenna sat on a bench with Noah beside her, big fountains in the background. He'd circled a tree in the corner. Sabal Palm, he signed, fingerspelling the words slowly. Not in Missouri. That's Florida. He pulled out another sketchbook. Downtown Sarasota, summer, drawn from a TV travel show he'd watched on mute, complete with the same palms and curved fountains. My heart thudded heavily. Jenna had moved to Florida 4 years earlier, and I knew she lived in Sarasota because she'd posted about the beaches on Facebook, the one place I still saw her life in filtered squares. He pointed at a photo labeled Halloween 2018, taken in what was supposed to be my living room. Plastic pumpkins, orange string lights around the window, Jenna in a witch hat, her arm around a boy in a skeleton costume. He tapped the window frame. Our house has double-hung windows, he said. This one is slider. Different. He slid open a drawer and pulled out a sheet of paper with 2 drawings. Our window, vertical panes, latch in the middle, and a slider window, one pane shifting behind another. Arrows and notes surrounded them. He turned to a letter Jenna had included, supposedly written in 2012 but printed on Fern and Pine stationery, tiny leaf logo in the corner. I'd never heard of it. Noah had. He'd drawn the same logo in another notebook labeled Stationery at Mall 2015. Underneath, he'd written, Fern and Pine closed 2016, based on a sign he'd sketched in a mall store window. Store closing. How do you know when it closed? I asked. He flipped to a drawing of the sign. In the corner, he'd written the date from my calendar, the 4th of April 2016, Mall W. Gran. It was that week, he said simply. I took a breath and let it out slowly. You really think you can prove these are fake with just light and paper? He shrugged. Light doesn't lie, he signed. I brought his sketches and notes to Mary. She spent an hour studying them, her brow furrowing deeper with each page. This is fascinating, she said finally. But a judge is going to want more than a teenager's drawings. We need an expert to confirm. Can we get one? I asked. I know a forensic photo analyst in St. Louis, she said. He usually works for insurance companies. If he can verify that the photos and videos were taken recently and not 10 years ago, we'll have something solid. She tapped Noah's Light Map of Missouri pages thoughtfully. Tell Noah, I'm very glad he notices what the rest of us miss. That night, I went to his room. He was sitting at his easel, working on a painting for the gallery Sunrise over a cornfield, light stretching in delicate bands across the soil. Mary is bringing in a specialist, I signed. Someone who looks at photos for a living. He nodded once. She thinks your light maps might help, I added. He paused, brush hovering. Then he signed, Good. Need more eyes. The weeks before court crawled. Depositions came first. Mary and I sat in Sanders's sleek downtown office with its view of the Missouri River and its framed degrees. Jenna sat at the long conference table in a soft gray sweater, minimal jewelry, hair in loose waves like a shampoo commercial. She looked like a mom from a TV show. I hated her for it. Sanders asked her questions while a court reporter typed and an interpreter signed for Noah. Miss Hall, Sanders said, can you describe your involvement in Noah's life over the past 12 years? Jenna folded her hands, eyes wide and solemn. I tried to stay connected as much as I could, she said. I visited whenever I had the money for a bus ticket. I sent what little I could for his therapies. I called regularly. Lies poured out of her mouth in a steady stream. Christmas visits that never happened. Birthdays where she claimed to have brought presents to grandma's. Phone calls every few months to check on his progress. Us. She named specific dates. That Easter in 2013, I came for the weekend. We colored eggs. He showed me his drawings. She smiled wistfully. I clenched my hands in my lap until my nails dug into my palms. Mary had warned me. Do not react. The court reporter records everything. Don't give Sanders free ammunition about you being emotional or unstable. I bit my tongue hard enough to taste blood. When it was Mary's turn, she kept her voice cool. You claim to have sent these money orders? She said, pointing to the copies. Yes, Jenna said, hand on her heart. Whenever I had money to spare. You have the original receipts? Mary asked. No, Jenna said quickly. I moved a few times, but I made copies for my records. Mary's gaze flicked to Sanders. Of course you did. After Jenna's performance, they deposed Noah. He sat at the table, posture rigid, interpreter by his side. Sanders smiled at him like he was indulging a child. Noah, he said carefully, do you remember your mother visiting you at your grandmother's house? The interpreter signed. Noah watched her hands, then thought for a long moment. I remember her at 5, he said aloud, each syllable deliberate. Then, not. Do you remember phone calls? Sanders asked. Hearing her voice? Maybe seeing her on FaceTime? Noah frowned. He signed slowly. I was learning ASL. Phones don't sign. Then, after a pause, he added aloud, I don't recall. What about money from her? Sanders pressed. Gifts? Cards? Noah shook his head once. Grandma paid. Sanders sat back like he'd won. To him, Noah's answers sounded fuzzy, unreliable. Of course, a deaf kid with a communication disorder couldn't be expected to remember details from 10 years ago. That was the story he would tell the judge. When we got home, I sank into a chair and dropped my head into my hands. We're going to lose, I whispered. She's going to win because she printed some pictures on nice paper and I never dragged her to court when she left. Noah stood in the doorway for a second, then turned and walked back to his room. I wanted him to comfort me, to sign it'll be okay, Grandma, to show some flash of fear. Instead, he closed his door. For the first time in years, I cried alone. The night before the hearing, I woke up at 3 a.m. and couldn't go back to sleep. The house was dark, the way Noah liked it. Streetlights leaked through the curtains in thin lines. Under his door, light glowed. I padded down the hallway and knocked once, then pushed the door open. Noah sat at his desk in sweatpants and an old t-shirt, hair sticking up in every direction. His hearing aids were on the desk beside the ivory mug, which was half full of cold coffee. His walls were covered in new drawings, simplified versions of Jenna's forged photos with notes all over them. His laptop was open, a spreadsheet filling the screen with rows of dates, times, file names. You need sleep, kiddo, I said softly, making sure he saw my mouth. Court is in the morning. He didn't turn around. His pencil scratched against the paper. After a moment, he said, Almost done. Done with what? I asked. He tapped the spreadsheet. Timeline, he said. Light, weather, receipts, truth. I stepped closer. The columns were labeled with things like photo date, light angle, weather data, independence, MO, weather data, Sarasota, FL. He'd cross-referenced Jenna's supposed dates with actual sunrise and sunset times, humidity levels, and even the presence of snow or rain. How did you? I started, then stopped. Of course he had. Noah, I said, throat tight. I don't know how to fight her. Mary says without proof, a judge might. He put his pencil down and finally turned to look at me. Tomorrow, he said quietly, his voice like sandpaper. You tell truth. That's your job. I blinked. And what's yours? He tapped his temple. Mine is remember, he said. I do that part. If you want. He turned back to his drawings. I went to bed and lay awake until the first weak gray light seeped around the curtains. He stayed at his desk the whole night. When I knocked again at 6, he was still there, but his eyes were clear. The courthouse in downtown Kansas City was smaller than I expected. Beige walls, metal detectors, tired security officers. The hallway outside the courtroom smelled faintly of coffee and floor cleaner. Mary met us at the entrance, file box in hand. Morning, Helen, she said. Young man. She nodded at Noah and signed the same. Noah nodded back, hands in his pockets. In the courtroom, Jenna sat at the table on the right with Sanders, looking appropriately somber in a navy dress and a cardigan. Her hair was pulled back, no dramatic earrings, no flashy heels. She looked like every earnest mother on every PTA board I'd ever served with. We sat at the table on the left. Mary arranged our binders and Noah's sketchbooks. The Judge Harrison, mid-50s, sharp eyes behind rimless glasses, took the bench. All rise, the bailiff intoned. My knees wobbled as we stood. Once everyone sat, Sanders began. He'd clearly practiced his speech. Your Honor, he said, this is a case about a mother who has faced hardship yet remained committed to her child as best she could, and a grandmother who, understandably, struggles to let go. Miss Hall never relinquished her rights. She has documentation of financial support and contact. She simply seeks to formalize what she has always been, Noah's mother and guardian. He laid out Jenna's photos and documents like trophies. Judge Harrison examined them one by one. The photos were glossy, the letters neatly printed, the money order copies crisp. "Miss Hall," the judge said, "please come forward." Jenna walked to the witness stand, her flats soundless on the carpet. She was sworn in. "Miss Hall," the judge asked, "tell me about your involvement in your son's life since he began living with your mother." Jenna clasped her hands. "Your Honor, I was 22 when I had Noah," she said, voice trembling just enough. "I was overwhelmed. I made mistakes. I thought leaving him with my mom temporarily was best. I always intended to come back," she went on, about addiction issues she'd supposedly battled, about shame and distance. She claimed she'd visited whenever she could, that she'd sent money even when she couldn't afford groceries, that my resentment had made it hard to be physically present. "I called regularly," she said, wiping a tear. "I asked about his therapies, his school. I sent letters when Mom wouldn't answer the phone. From my table, all I could do was listen as she constructed an entire alternate reality in which she had been some offstage hero." She held up the Christmas 2014 photo. "This was the year I brought him a train set," she said. "He loved the lights." She gestured to a "Summer at the Park" shot. "This was 2016. He'd grown so much." She painted herself as flawed but devoted. Judge Harrison's expression stayed neutral, but she listened carefully. She asked about dates, about how Jenna had sent money orders, because I didn't have a bank account then, about why she never went to court sooner. "I was ashamed," Jenna said. "I thought Mom was doing fine, but now that Noah has this grant, he's going to be in the public eye. He'll need support, guidance. I want to be there the right way." Mary's turn. "Miss Hall," she said, standing, "did you ever file for custody after you left Noah with your mother?" "No," Jenna said. "Did you ever seek a court-ordered visitation schedule?" "No." "Did you ever send your mother certified letters regarding your parental involvement?" Jenna hesitated. "No, too." "Yet you kept copies of money orders and printed call logs from 12 years ago?" Mary asked. "Despite moving multiple times?" Jenna nodded. "Yes." "Why didn't you keep receipts for therapy payments you allegedly made?" Mary asked. "I didn't think I'd need them," Jenna said quickly. "I didn't know there would be all this." Mary let the silence sit for a moment, then said, "No further questions." She called me next. I took the stand, my hands shaking as I swore to tell the truth. Mary guided me through 10 years of schedules and appointments. Audiology visits, IEP meetings, nights up with stomach flu, early mornings at the bus stop. Did Missing Hall ever attend any of these appointments? Mary asked. "No," I said. "Not one." "Do you recall her sending money?" "No," I said. "I've lived on my pension and substitute teaching. I have bank records. There was never anything from her." Sanders cross-examined, painting me as controlling, maybe even overprotective. "Mrs. Marshall," he said, "is it fair to say you resent your daughter for leaving Noah with you?" "Of course I do," I said. "She abandoned him." His eyebrows lifted. "So it's possible your anger has colored your memory of how involved she was." "If she had been involved," I said, "I would have written it down. I write everything down." Laughter rippled from the gallery. The judge rapped her gavel lightly. "Order." After I stepped down, the weight in my chest felt heavier. Judge Harrison had listened politely, compassionately, but there was no way to tell which way she was leaning. Before Mary could call the forensic analyst, the judge looked at Noah. "Mr. Marshall," she said, and the interpreter signed. "You're nearly an adult. Do you wish to address the court?" Noah sat very still. Then, slowly, he stood. Mary looked surprised. I was stunned. We hadn't planned for him to speak. "Yes," he said quietly. The interpreter signed anyway, out of habit. "Come forward," the judge said. Noah picked up a large portfolio bag I hadn't even noticed under his chair and walked to the stand. He was sworn in, his right hand raised, interpreter by his side. "What would you like to say?" Judge Harrison asked. He set the portfolio on the ledge, opened it, and pulled out several large drawings mounted on foam board, along with a binder. "I don't talk," A lot, he began, his voice halting, the interpreter signing in sync. I draw. I remember with pictures. He propped the first board on an easel Mary quickly grabbed from the side of the room. This is my living room, he said. The drawing showed our couch, the green rug, the lamps, the exact pattern of light through the window at 3 p.m. In December. Every month, same day, 8 years. He flipped through laminated pages behind the drawing 12 versions of the same scene, labeled by date and time. Light map, he said. Of my house. He turned to Jenna's Christmas 2014 photo on the evidence table. Your Honor, he said, looking up at the judge. She says this is my house 2014. He held up one of his drawings from that date, a December 2014 living room. In his drawing, the tree stood in the opposite corner. The lamp on the floor cast a broad circle of light that hit halfway up the wall. In Jenna's photo, the tree sat where a lamp should have been. The window trim was wrong. The light from the supposed overhead fixture cast a sharp, narrow shape that didn't match the room at all. He tapped the string of lights on Jenna's tree. These lights, he said, didn't sell here until 2017. How do you know that? The judge asked. He flipped to a page in his binder. A drawing of the holiday aisle at Target, the 3rd of December 2017, with the star-shaped lights drawn in careful detail. First day I saw them, he said. I remember because I like how the plastic cut the light. He traced a date written in the corner. A murmur ran through the courtroom. He moved to Park Summer 2016. She says Missouri, he said. It's Florida. He pointed to the fountains in the background, then to a sketch he'd made from a TV program, labeled Sarasota, FL, Riverfront, PBS travel show. The palms, the curve of the tiles, the style of the bench, they all matched. He turned to another of Jenna's photos, supposedly taken outside my house. He tapped the window. Our windows go up and down, he said, making a sliding motion vertically with his hand. This goes side to side. He mimed it. Different kind. He laid down a drawing of our real windows, then a generic slider window, annotations around both. Do you have anything other than your drawings to support this? The judge asked, cautious but curious. Yes, Noah said. He opened the binder to printed pages from weather databases. Mary must have helped him pull those and pointed. December 25, 2014, Independence, Missouri, he said. Cloudy, no snow, 39 degrees. In her picture, he pointed. Sharp sunlight, strong shadow. He shook his head. Not that day. Not here. Judge Harrison looked at the weather printouts, then at the photo. Your Honor, Mary interjected. If I may, we also have a forensic photo analyst present. Eyes in. She called him to the stand. A middle-aged man with wire-rimmed glasses who introduced himself as Dr. Harris. He testified that he'd examined all of Jenna's digital files. The embedded metadata for each image, he said, shows creation dates between 7 and 9 weeks ago. The timestamps do not match the handwritten dates on the prints. Could the metadata be manipulated? Judge Harrison asked. In theory, he said. Yes. But in these files, there are multiple indicators. Camera model release dates, software versions used to edit, GPS location tags. Where those are present, they point to Sarasota, Florida, not Independence, Missouri, and to the last couple of months, not years ago. He confirmed that the videos Jenna had supplied, supposedly candid footage of little Noah chasing leaves in my yard, showed evidence of editing overlays and modern smartphone codecs released only in recent years. Combined with the inconsistencies in architecture and environmental details Mr. Marshall has identified, it is my professional opinion that these photos and videos were staged recently, Dr. Harris said. They are not documentary evidence from 12 years ago. Jenna's face drained of color. Miss Hall, the judge said, her voice suddenly cold. Do you have any explanation for why your files appear recently created and tagged to Florida, not Missouri? I don't understand this technical stuff, Jenna stammered. My friend helped me. Scan them. Maybe he messed something up. Your friend? Judge Harrison repeated. Did your friend also advise you to falsify dates and locations? No, Jenna said quickly. I didn't falsify anything. I swear. I was there. I may have mixed up dates, but, Miss Hall, the judge said sharply. You testified under oath that these photos and videos represented visits you made to your son over a 12-year period. They do, Jenna insisted, her voice rising, slipping. I mean, maybe not every single. The judge held up a hand. Enough. She turned back to Noah. Young man, she said, her tone softening a fraction. How long have you been keeping these light maps? He thought. Since 9, he said. Maybe 8. I like to know what is real. Why is that important to you? She asked. He looked toward our table, at me. Because people lie, he said simply, his eyes steady. Light doesn't. Shadows don't. They always tell on you. The interpreter signed the last phrase with a little extra emphasis. Silence settled over the courtroom. Judge Harrison took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. When she spoke again, her voice was firm. I've heard enough, she said. This court finds that Ms. Hall's documentary submissions are not credible. The testimony of Mr. Marshall, corroborated by a forensic analyst and years of independently documented visual records, establishes that these photos and videos were created recently and do not reflect historical events as claimed. She looked at Jenna. You have attempted to mislead this court with fabricated evidence in an effort to obtain financial control over your son's assets. Jenna's mouth opened and closed. Your Honor, Sit down, Miss Hall, the judge said. She turned to Mary. Miss Ellis, your client has been Noah's primary caregiver in every meaningful sense for 12 years. Though Miss Hall's parental rights were never formally terminated, her conduct constitutes de facto abandonment. Noah is nearly an adult and clearly wishes to remain with his grandmother. She banged the gavel once. Full physical and legal guardianship, including financial management of the gallery funds, is hereby granted to Miss Helen Marshall. Miss Hall's petition is denied. I sagged in my seat, tears blurring my vision. In addition, Judge Harrison continued, her voice frosty, this court is referring Miss Hall's conduct and these falsified documents to the Jackson County Prosecutor's Office for review of potential charges, including fraud and perjury. Jenna made a small, choking sound. The hearing is adjourned, the judge said. The gavel hit the block. It was over. Outside the courthouse, on the wide stone steps, the March wind bit through my jacket. I stood there, stunned, watching the traffic on the street below blur into streaks of color. Noah stood beside me, hands in his pockets, gaze tilted up toward the sky. You knew, I signed, my fingers still shaky. You've been guarding us this whole time, he answered with a small nod. You saved us, I said aloud, hoping he could read my lips. He tilted his head. We saved each other, he said, voice barely above a whisper. Then, unexpected, he reached out and squeezed my hand once before letting go. It was the warmest thing I'd felt in years. 6 months later, the world looked different, but our routines stayed comfortingly the same. Noah still used the ivory mug. It had a chip now on the other side, from the time he bumped it with an elbow while gesturing. But he refused to let me replace it. He rented a small studio apartment above a coffee shop in the Arts District, walking distance from the gallery. The walls were lined with canvases and pinned sketches. The floor was almost always dusted in eraser shavings and charcoal. The gallery's investment paid off. His first show sold out in the opening weekend. Lawyers talked to Mary about trust funds and long-term financial planning. The non-legal outcome of court for Jenna came a month later, a plea deal negotiated by her public defender. She avoided jail, but she didn't walk away clean. She got 2 years of probation and a requirement to complete 180 hours of community service at a nonprofit serving deaf and hard-of-hearing children, Mary told me, almost sheepish. The judge suggested that placement pretty strongly. One afternoon, I drove across town to drop off some donated art supplies at the center. Old habits die hard. Retired teachers can't resist a place full of kids and crayons. The building was bright and echoey, kids signing to each other in quick bursts. My hands itched to join in. I turned a corner and stopped dead. Jenna sat cross-legged on a rug, surrounded by 4 little kids in hearing aids and cochlear implants. She held a picture book open, tracking the text with one finger and signing each line in slow, careful ASL. Her signs were clumsy, her facial expressions too small, but she was trying. One little boy reached up and touched her chin, correcting the shape of a sign. She let him guide her hand without flinching. She looked older, tired, smaller somehow. She glanced up and saw me. For a split second, everything in her face, anger, shame, resentment, something like longing, flickered. Neither of us moved. A staff member behind me said, "That volunteer comes in extra hours, says she's trying to learn what she should have known a long time ago." She didn't know who I was. I watched Jenna sign again, and finished and good job with her crooked hands. I turned and walked out without saying a word. Some conversations don't need to happen out loud, or at all. On Tuesday nights, I still bring dinner to Noah's place. "Ma'am, the artist is in the back," the barista downstairs always says with a grin when I come in with a casserole dish. Upstairs, Noah's ivory mug sits on the counter, waiting. We eat at his small table, me with my decaf, him with his water, and talk in signs and occasional spoken words. One evening, after we'd finished washing dishes side by side, he dried his hands, then signed, "Sit." I sat. He fidgeted with the mug for a moment, running his thumb over the chip. "Gran," he said, voice quiet. "I know what you gave up." I blinked. "What do you mean, honey?" "Trips," he said, counting on his fingers. "Friends, sleep, money. You said no to a cruise Kath invited you on." He signed my friend's name clumsily. "You didn't go because of me." "That was years ago," I said. "And I get motion sick. Ever." He almost smiled. "School told you to send me away," he said, hands spelling SEND, then pushing forward. "Residential. You stayed." My throat tightened. I flashed back to that meeting in 6th grade when an administrator had gently suggested that a specialized campus might meet his needs better. I'd told them absolutely not. "I'm your grandma," I said. "That's not a sacrifice. That's the job." He looked at his hands. "She didn't stay," he said after a moment. "You did." Silence settled between us, thick but not heavy. "It mattered," he said, eyes flicking up to meet mine. "I remember that more than bad parts. Two I do not forward." I reached across the table, leaving my hand on the wood between us, close enough that he could choose. After a long moment, he laid his hand over mine. We stayed like that for a few seconds. Then he pulled back gently, stood, and moved to his easel. Routine resumed. Comfortable silence, the scratch of pencil, the hum of the fridge. On my way out, I kissed the top of his head. He didn't flinch. "See you next Tuesday, kiddo," I said, exaggerating the words so he could read them. "Tuesday," he echoed. Driving home through the familiar streets, taking the same turns I'd taken for years, I stopped at a red light and glanced at my phone. A text from Noah lit the screen. "Grandma, you didn't leave me. I remember, just that." I sat there with my blinker ticking, eyes blurring, until the car behind me honked. So that's my story. If you were in my place, could you forgive your own daughter for what she did, for leaving, for lying, for trying to steal your grandson's future? I don't know my answer yet, but I know this. Light told the truth for us when words weren't enough, and a boy who barely speaks said everything I needed to hear in 4 simple words. "I remember you stayed."